Unconstitutional. Want to sing along? I might declare you hella musical. Objection sustained. Verdict not guilty.
Last week, Rhemus Helms placed a $14 million, or was it $114 million bounty on a small prototype bioengineered version of his genital that just so happened to no longer be in the care, custody, control, or possession of Dr. D's genital lab. Yes, this is unseemly, but these type of issues are commonplace in today's workplace, which is often remote on the Karl Gerber Workplace Lawyer Show, where I'm Karl Gerber, a real workplace lawyer.
There's a scientist on the way here.
Rhemus Helms, no reputable scientist would show his face or her face, master unmasked, past midnight in the law office, broadcasting on AM radio.
I told him your show was on FM radio.
At this time, more people listen to AM than FM. Don't go around disparaging my show.
More people listen to this show than anything else on the radio because it's my show. Mine. I am the sponsor.
Well, I stopped booking your guests, and now you're coming down here at midnight and bringing these weirdos into my office. It's hard enough to decontaminate this place due to COVID.
Mr. Gerber, Dr. Juxta Hernandez Sanchez Ortega Lupita Mino Mendez is a genuine PhD.
Well, since he comes from such a long line of Lupitas, maybe I was wrong about your dragons.
Hello, everybody. Dr. J here.
Where'd you come from?
The same place that you come from.
Where is that?
A womb.
Oh, we have so much in common.
Yes, and I almost got the T-bones coming out.
Is that a fact?
Well, this show isn't about traffic accidents.
Well, listen, my mamacita had a T-shaped uterus. Ever heard of that?
Do you have a purpose?
Well, just because I don't have a fancy office with a latrine out on the balcony for a radio show guests, that doesn't mean I don't have a purpose.
Rhemus! Get this man out of here! You two! Nobody is allowed in this office!
Gee, Mr. Gerber, I thought you'd be impressed with me wearing this memory mask.
Maybe you could get lost in that mask and disappear for hours.
Why else does a man wear a memory mask?
Pure perversion! I love it! Deep-rooted mental problems.
Maybe you do have a purpose.
He's here to tell you about a new scientific invention.
Well, as long as it doesn't relate to sex, I don't want to hear any more about not very accurate sex robots where men get stuck and nobody opts into the class action because they're too embarrassed to admit that they purchased one of your sex robots.
Oh, Mr. Gerber, that's fun to say. As a doctorate of law, have you ever heard of the S. Pavoniana?
Oh, my Latin only takes me so far.
Oh, Mr. Gerber, even I know the S stands for Sebastiania.
Sebastiania. How that name brings...
Sebastiana. Oh, how that name brings back feelings. I called my 7th batch of genitals Sebastiana because I was in Sebastiana when they were conceived.
Oh, Dr. D is here now!
Oh, don't mind me asking, Doctor. But how were they conceived in Sebastiana if your lab is in Chatsworth?
I don't believe the two of you have had the pleasure of being acquainted.
Yes, it may be pure pleasure for both of us.
Well, Dr. D, this is Dr. J.
Oh, heavens, the centrifuges. You're Dr. J. I never would have recognized you. When last I saw you on the court, you were such a tall African-American man.
I think it's to time everyone stops referring to each other by words that don't even describe their skin colors, I'm certain one day in the not-so-distant future will be looked upon as, well, barbaric, quite primitive to be referring to people by extremes of their skin color.
Well, that's right. I'd much rather you call me by my distinguishing characteristics.
Okay, it's time for the sponsorship plug. This program has been made possible through a generous grant from the Helms Foundation's $5.14 billion in funding and 14 inches of endowment.
Langwood Legworms, that's an incredible amount of endowment.
Dr. J, could you just get on with whatever perverse things you plan to say on this show so we can be done in less than 30 minutes?
Mr. Gerber, don't be so premature.
I'd like to say, I'd like to get some advertising on the AM stations to market to those guys who don't want the little teal-colored F-150 shaped pills because they're too embarrassed to talk to their doctors about it. Why not just hire a stand-in? Their wives, girlfriends, boyfriends, their hands will never know the difference.
This type of content must stop at once!
Forget about those silly pills. I can clone one to look just like yours. Your partner will never know the difference.
Obviously, this would be completely unnecessary for me. But there are a lot of guys that want to keep up the image even if they aren't in a committed relationship. Or not any relationship at all. They don't even have a partner for the immediate moment.
Well, it seems like a lot of trouble just so the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing.
Gentlemen and Dr. D, I didn't come on this show to talk about sex organs.
You didn't? I thought that's what you were going to tell Mr. Gerber about. The bounty hunter went to so much trouble to find you.
What does Dr. J, who incidentally was never a basketball player according to his CV online, what does he have to do with the bounty hunter?
Yes, I've never even stood next to him at the urinal.
Oh, the sad fact of the matter is not a lot of real men, or many of my species, stand together at urinal time these days.
On account of Corona?
Of course not, Mr. Gerber. This country is too divided.
I'm finding this sexist. Women can't relate to the whole ball game, trough urinal thing.
Now, that is where I beg to differ, Mr. Gerber. As a scientist involved in my particular line, well, the whole purpose for some men is to get a stand-in for when they go to the ball game.
This is absolutely absurd.
Late-stage capitalism, Mr. Gerber. Late-stage capitalism.
And what exactly is your fortune, Mr. Helms?
Something north of 114 billion.
That's a lot of money. I mean, for a guy who really got it together with bedroom toys and sex robots.
Late-stage capitalism, Mr. Gerber. I just happened to be at the right place at the wrong time.
Like I said, that New York party where that guy who's running held the resin mold your thing just happened to make its way onto when he had all those casino debts to pay, and you had absolutely no idea that the mold would go to Aid and Elvira to make those unauthorized copies of your I don't even want to say the word.
Mr. Gerber, Dr. J is here to talk about beans and moths and things that get stuck in...
No more talk about things that get stuck!
Mr. Gerber, we're here to talk about the Mexican jumping bean.
Again, I find talk about national origin and identifying features based on national origin and stereotypes to be very offensive.
Exactly. The S. pavilloniana is a slender tree or large shrub that grows up to 10 to 12 meters, 30 to 39 feet tall. The trunk diameter at breast height is 6.7 to 10.1 centimeters, 2.6 inches, or 4 to 4.0 inches.
Yes, and indeed, it can resemble Excoexcaria indica, but the female calyx is eglandulos, lacking glands inside. Now, that is very unlike the human species and the female sex organs I created. Not mounted or anything. I must give credit to the Helms Foundation for devising a means to mount my life work.
What are we talking about?
Reproduction.
Oh my God, this is the Karl Gerber Workplace Lawyer Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC, and this is just getting weirder and weirder. Stand by for more of this. I really don't know what's about to happen here. Call me at 877-525-0700 if you want to.
Here's our little jumping beans. Let's jump with them. Ready?
The Employment Lawyers Group has successfully represented employees in wrongful termination, sexual harassment, employment discrimination, and unpaid wage lawsuits, including class actions. They are only paid when and if money is collected from the employer. Call 877-525-0700 during the week for an experienced job lawyer. 877-525-0700.
Unconstitutional. Want to sing along on my
Talk Radio 790 KABC. You're listening to Karl Gerber Workplace Lawyer Show. I'm Karl Gerber, and I'm a real workplace lawyer, and I got a bunch of weirdos in my office here.
Yes, welcome back. I wish to make it clear. We're all devoting this entire show to talking about the tree of which the fruit is a Mexican jumping bean.
Again, why Mexican? We can't have that sort of ethnic stereotyping.
Well, true. The S. pavoniana is also found in Costa Rica. I should tell you I was surfing there when I realized waves of pleasure are similar to the waves in the ocean. And that's what was missing in the formula.
Was that you?
Cindy D's father was a Scandinavian surfer on a surf safari in Baltimore when I met him. That is, before he did the whole reassignment thing.
I feel we're getting highly sidetracked from the matter at hand. Apparently, Mexican or Costa Rican jumping beans.
I don't think we've ever discussed it before, but he won an all-expense-paid trip to Baltimore.
And he just happened to land himself some work in a John Waters movie you were an extra in, Dr. D?
He was desperate. None of the expenses were paid, and he got kicked out of the Holiday Inn on the second night.
What was he doing?
He had a whole suitcase full of Mexican jumping beans. They thought he was having an orgy.
No, that wasn't an orgy. I drove all the way from Annapolis, where I was filming the 114 Sins of Sin.
Well, now, I don't want to give the impression to your listeners, Mr. Gerber. Still fun to say. Mexican jumping beans are just some sort of curio item you pick up at a body shop or a sex shop.
Oh, definitely not. I mean, they sure are good ways to remember a body shop by after, they fix your total vehicle.
It was difficult to determine the species of plant responsible for the novelty item at first, as C. deschansanicia larva leaves the seed sterile.
Sterile?
Again, another reason for a stand-in. Although I do recall quite a few episodes of this show, starting with episode 63 to be found on the Karl Gerber with a K channel on YouTube, about Rhemus Helms procreating sex robots, of course, with the modified units from Dr. D that were creating mini tiny earthquakes known as Swarmageddon due to the excess fluids they created underneath the earth.
Oh, my girls and I have always enjoyed a good Mexican jumping bean and all.
Oh, yes. The things a girl can do with a bean.
But seriously, Dr. J, why are we discussing Mexican jumping beans when we could be talking about so many more important issues, such as escaped felons, the 2020 elections, and most germane to me, escaped genitals and the proliferation of property damage claims?
I'd have to agree. Well, not in respect to felonious bioengineered genitals causing property damage, but the 2020 election, and I guess the proliferation of property damage claims due to protests and the federal government claiming they're sending in those troops to protect federal courthouses being destroyed. I mean, those are important topics.
Mr. Gerber, don't you want to know what makes a Mexican jumpy being jump? And even more important, how that relates to the sexual Olympics I am going to host once we've moved on to COVID minus in 2022.
Well, why wait for your sexual Olympics, Rhemus Helms? They can just wear masks.
They're already doing that. It's so they won't be tempted to kiss.
Who is the they?
It is a fact there is no shortage in hookups. I was reading in a journal last night, drinking a bit of kombucha herbal tea. They're meeting up wearing face masks so they won't be tempted to kiss. And, can I say it? They aren't facing each other.
Thank you, Dr. D. This program is intended to bring the listeners all the new sexual trends. That is a true fact.
Unfortunately, everything on this show is true. I don't just make these things up. There really are people who are sexually obsessed with buildings and all the rest of what we cover.
Wow, if that's the case, I think I'll take my leave now. I'm a credible expert on the Mexican jumping bean, and there is nothing, zero sexuality about a moth-laid egg that hatches on the plant, and the larva eats away the inside of the bean until it becomes hollow and attaches itself to the inside of the bean with a silk-like thread.
No, I'm sorry, Dr. J. I just don't see it that way. Eating away at the inside of a bean, attaching itself to the inside with a silk-like thread, is not exactly asexual.
Well, I do see Rhemus Helms' perspective. In fact, I share his perspective.
Oh, no doubt. And the two of you are in that industry.
Well, the larva may live for months inside the bean with varying periods of dormancy. If the larva has adequate conditions of moisture and temperature, it will live long enough to go into a pupal stage. In the spring, the moth forces itself out of the bean and through a round trap door.
A trapdoor, just like the way they are doing it these days.
Oh, Dr. D! Dr. J, please continue after being so rudely interrupted by Dr. D.
Well, the larva leaves behind the pupal casing. After its metamorphosis, the small silver and gray colored moths live far more than a few days.
It's so sad, but so fascinating at the same time.
You'll see it that way after you discover the true reason why Dr. J has come on this show.
Well, it's obvious he's come here to thoroughly educate us on the Mexican jumping bean that can also be found in Costa Rica, and I'm now informed was improvidently allowed to hatch in Havana.
Mr. Gerber, oh, I just love saying it. I have to level with you. A whole new species has been found in trees of and around Sun Valley, California.
I don't live far from Sun Valley, California. Might jumping beans be hatching on my acres?
Well, so far we've only identified these new species in Sun Valley, California.
Where are they growing?
Mostly in parking lots and retirement homes, public golf courses, and taboo parlors.
I really don't see the correlation between taboo parlors and retirement homes.
Guys trying to be macho.
Indeed, the Casanova of the Golden Years retirement home. Studies have shown that population is having more sex than college students.
Well, that's sort of obvious. These days, at least.
Do those figures include relations with inanimate objects?
Well, golly! I mean, maybe next week we can go on a field trip and see these new jumping bean trees.
Well, I am afraid that you wouldn't want to do that if you knew what is inside them.
Well, yeah, I mean, like a lot of moths confused with mosquitoes. I've confused a lot of moths with mosquitoes last summer, and larvae can be scary.
That's not what's in these species.
Well, then what is?
Reproductive organs.
Oh, I'm sure larvae can multiply.
No, Dr. D's product.
No!
Well, I am afraid Mr. Helms is correct.
Are you saying the infantile unit I created on January 14th of this year that apparently got loose or lost, hopefully not kidnapped, somehow metamorphosized or asexually split, if you will?
Dr. D, I think you know my unit is not asexual.
Oh, well, it's a truly complicated species. The most complex I'd ever cloned. Very charged. Not your ordinary. An organ with a mind of its own. A very unique personality. Something that could not be properly cloned.
Dr. D, are you saying it couldn't be properly cloned and it has figured out a way to clone itself?
This is a miracle, a true miracle. It's a miracle, a true blue spectacle, a miracle come true. Whoa, 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 whoa. Now, do you understand why the beans jump, Mr. Gerber?
There is no way to dignify this.
Must there be?
Oh my God, this is the Karl Gerber Workplace Lawyer Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC. Give me a call at the office, 877-525-0700 for a real workplace lawyer, 877-525-0700 if you so wish. This is the Karl Gerber